Hey guys! Today we're diving into another truly horrifying case. If you want to support my channel, make sure to subscribe and stay active. It really helps me out. I'd be super grateful for that. Let's get started. Ashley Bocanegra was born on November 18, 1991, in the Bronx, one of New York City's 5 boroughs. She was raised by her mother, Jessica, along with her older sister. There's no public information about her father, and it remains unclear whether he was involved in Ashley's life. The family lived modestly, but maintained a steady lifestyle. Ashley was outgoing and energetic. She took pride in her appearance and had a strong interest in makeup. From a young age, she enjoyed experimenting with different styles, which made her stand out among her peers. After high school, she didn't pursue a specific career path right away. She worked in retail, trying to figure out her future, but without any firm plans. Around this time, she met Julian, a young man with whom she soon developed a serious relationship. They spent a lot of time together, and eventually, Ashley found out she was expecting. The pregnancy wasn't planned, but both of them decided to welcome the new chapter in their lives. They moved in together. In 2014, Ashley gave birth to a son. His name has not been publicly disclosed out of respect for his privacy. The arrival of their son marked a major shift. Ashley became fully focused on being a mother. Despite being young, Julian stepped up and participated in raising their child. Life in New York City was becoming more challenging. Rent was rising, and daily expenses kept piling up. By early 2015, the couple made the decision to move. They chose Atlanta, Georgia, a city with more affordable housing and a slower pace of life that wasn't too far from extended family. The move represented a fresh start. They secured an apartment in a residential complex that had security cameras and on-site staff. Visually, the neighborhood looked safe, and they hoped it would be a place to rebuild their day-to-day life. Though their romantic relationship eventually came to an end, they continued to live under the same roof for the sake of their son. They agreed to keep their personal lives separate until their son was older. Ashley took on most of the household responsibilities and began looking for a stable job. Eventually, she landed a position at a home improvement store, working the night shift. This arrangement allowed her to be at home during the day and work at night. It was a tough schedule, but it helped her improve her financial situation. Ashley was working toward creating stability and gradually gaining independence from her former partner, all while keeping the family dynamics peaceful. As Ashley adjusted to the demanding rhythm of overnight work, she became familiar with the store's routine. Most of her shifts took place on weeknights, and she was consistently scheduled with the same group of coworkers. This consistency helped form close-knit working relationships. It was in this environment that she first took notice of Daniel Gonzalez. He also worked at the same home improvement store and was usually scheduled on the same nights. Their conversations started with routine work-related questions. Daniel was proactive. He didn't shy away from hard tasks and often volunteered for the more demanding assignments. He came across as calm, polite, and friendly. He wasn't pushy, but somehow he was always nearby when Ashley needed an extra hand. Over time, they developed a steady rapport. What began as brief exchanges during breaks slowly evolved into real conversations. Ashley felt at ease around him. There was no pressure, no signs of him pushing boundaries. Daniel earned her trust. He avoided talking about personal matters and never made suggestive remarks, but it was clear he was interested. He asked about her day, showed concern for her well-being, and offered to help even when she hadn't asked for it. That set him apart from the rest of the crew. Shift after shift, their connection grew. Eventually, they exchanged numbers and started texting outside of work. Their messages quickly turned into a regular flow: jokes, short chats about everyday life, and occasionally planning to meet before work. Their bond moved beyond just being coworkers, but there was nothing overtly romantic about it. Everything felt natural. No one was rushing into anything, and neither made any direct moves. At the time, Ashley had no clue about Daniel's personal life. Neither he nor any of their co-workers mentioned that he was living with a woman and their kids. He never brought up who he lived with, and there were no signs he was in a relationship. In everyday conversations, he didn't come across as someone juggling complicated domestic issues. He was calm, composed, and never showed signs of stress. Eventually, they found out they were neighbors. They both lived in the same apartment complex, something they discovered by chance while talking about the area. Their apartments were located within the same gated community. This made things easier. They now crossed paths not only at work, but also during the day. Sometimes Daniel helped Ashley carry groceries or met her in the parking lot and walked her to her building. To Ashley, it all felt like a comfortable friendship with a dependable coworker. The fact that he lived nearby and was willing to lend a hand seemed like a bonus, just someone being considerate. At that stage, she had no idea about what his situation really was. At the time these events unfolded, Daniel Gonzalez was a 27-year-old living in Atlanta, Georgia. Though not legally married, he was in a long-term relationship with Antoinette Stevens, a woman his age with whom he had shared over a decade of life. Their bond dated back to childhood. Their families had known each other for years, and Daniel and Antoinette had been together since their teenage years. Over time, they became parents to 2 sons, ages 9 and 6. Despite the appearance of a stable home life, things behind closed doors were far more complicated. The relationship between Daniel and Antoinette had grown tense over the years, with arguments becoming more frequent. Most disagreements were sparked by routine issues, but the conflicts often escalated beyond everyday disputes. According to those close to them, Antoinette had a quick temper. She could go from calm to confrontational over the smallest details, and this behavior wasn't just noted by Daniel. It was something others around her noticed too. Daniel rarely talked about his home life with colleagues. Only those closest to him had any idea about his personal situation. He kept his struggles private. Still, the ongoing tension at home began to wear on him. His relationship with Antoinette became more about logistics than love. Discussions focused on parenting, bills, and chores. While they still presented as a couple to outsiders, the emotional connection between them was fading. Around this time, Daniel's younger sister Janine moved in with them. She was 17 and had recently dropped out of school. The family hoped that relocating and living with Daniel and Antoinette would give her the structure she needed to reset and figure out her next steps. She had no clear plan for the future and needed a fresh environment to get back on track. Janine and Antoinette quickly grew close. Their shared history played a role. They had known each other since childhood and viewed one another more like sisters than in-laws. Daniel, on the other hand, didn't have a particularly strong bond with Janine. She spent most of her time with Antoinette and the boys. Having a third adult in the household didn't ease the tension. In fact, it made things worse. Janine became a regular witness to the arguments between Daniel and Antoinette, and over time, she began to take sides. Her loyalty was clearly with Antoinette. According to people familiar with the family, Janine didn't hide the fact that she blamed Daniel for the constant fighting. The alliance between the two women only deepened the emotional divide at home and created a sense of isolation for Daniel. By the time he began spending more time around Ashley, Daniel was already feeling alienated. His partner was irritable, the sons needed constant attention, and his sister had become emotionally aligned with Antoinette. The home environment felt tense and unwelcoming. Daniel started spending more time outside, taking on extra shifts, lingering longer at work, and using his job as an escape from the conflicts. These dynamics would later influence his actions, though at that stage, he didn't show any open intent to drastically change his life. After a few weeks of regular conversations at work and texting outside their shifts, Ashley and Daniel started meeting up more frequently beyond their jobs. Their connection gradually moved beyond workplace chatter. They talked about exhaustion, daily routines, and parenting challenges. Ashley opened up about raising her son, her complicated relationship with Julian, and her plans to eventually move out and live independently. Daniel was always attentive. He never interrupted, always kept the conversation going, and focused on their shared struggles. He never mentioned that he was living with a partner and 2 sons. He didn't bring up his sister either. As their connection deepened, Ashley and Daniel started spending more time together. Sometimes they'd meet briefly before a shift. Other times they'd talk outside her building. Gradually, Daniel began staying a little longer. He'd come by in the evening, help out with dinner, and hang around while her son watched TV. Nothing about it felt abrupt. It was a slow, natural progression toward closeness. Ashley didn't ask too many questions, and Daniel gave her no reason to doubt his intentions. At that point, neither Julian nor any of their coworkers intervened. Ashley had full independence, and from the outside, everything seemed harmless. But back at Daniel's apartment, things were beginning to shift. Antoinette and Janine were paying closer attention to his schedule. He was spending more time away from home, and that didn't go unnoticed. Janine, who was usually home, began to pick up on the pattern. Daniel would leave without explaining where he was going and come back later than usual. She didn't know exactly where he was headed, but she started taking mental notes. She eventually shared her observations with Antoinette. The suspicions started building. Antoinette didn't confront Daniel right away, but his behavior made her uneasy. One day, Janine noticed something that confirmed her doubts. Daniel was regularly seen with the same woman in the apartment complex parking lot. She didn't yet know Ashley's name, but her appearance stuck. Janine watched them talk. There were no inappropriate gestures, no touching, no flirting, nothing that crossed a clear line. But still, it raised red flags. She didn't jump to conclusions, but from then on, she paid closer attention. While Ashley saw these encounters as casual and innocent, the tension in Daniel's apartment kept growing. Antoinette moved past simply asking questions. She began checking his phone and monitoring his behavior more closely. Though she had no concrete proof, the clues were stacking up. From that point on, the trust between them started to crumble. Ashley, meanwhile, remained unaware that anything was amiss. Daniel kept showing up, offering help, and chatting about daily life. Their bond was only getting stronger. But beyond those calm, everyday conversations, a series of quiet shifts had begun, ones that would soon lead to serious consequences. In the summer of 2022, Daniel, Antoinette, their sons, and Janine took a trip to Florida. They were headed there for Antoinette's mother's wedding. The plan was to spend a week with extended family, combining celebration with a bit of a getaway. The road trip was long, and they were staying at a relative's house. Despite the joyful occasion, things between Daniel and Antoinette were tense from the very start. Arguments broke out during the drive. Small issues over planning, coordination, and general fatigue. Once they arrived, the atmosphere didn't improve. Nearly every day was marked by conflict. Antoinette's relatives, who were hosting them, noticed the strained dynamic. By midweek, the tension had reached a boiling point. Disagreements happened over trivial things, but the tone became sharper and more irritable. Daniel often cut conversations short, shut down emotionally, and spent more time glued to his phone or stepping outside to be alone. Antoinette noticed. She tried to stay composed, but her patience was wearing thin. After the wedding ceremony, while most guests were relaxing, a moment occurred that would later shape the course of events. Daniel, tired and having had a few drinks, was outside in the yard talking with Janine. During the conversation, he opened up. He said he was worn out from his relationship with Antoinette and didn't see a future with her. Then he admitted something else. There was someone else in his life. He didn't name names, but he clarified that it was someone he worked with. Janine listened carefully, keeping her reaction neutral, but she was clearly taking it all in. That conversation marked a turning point. Janine, feeling more loyal to Antoinette than to her own brother, didn't hesitate to share what she'd heard. She told Antoinette directly that Daniel had admitted to seeing someone else. Surprisingly, Antoinette stayed calm. Instead of confronting him, she decided to play it smart. Her priority was to find out who the other woman was. They agreed to keep quiet about their suspicions and closely watch Daniel's behavior. Janine was fully on board. They made a pact. No action until they were back in Atlanta. Antoinette maintained a composed, even cheerful presence around family during the rest of the trip. Outwardly, things seemed calm, but underneath that surface was quiet calculation. She was determined to uncover the identity of the woman. After returning from Florida, the atmosphere in Daniel's apartment changed noticeably. Antoinette and Janine didn't bring up what had been said at the wedding, but they began carrying out a plan they had quietly set in motion. Their mission was to confirm whether Daniel was truly involved with a coworker. Instead of asking direct questions, they chose to monitor his habits, routines, and behavior. Since neither Antoinette nor Janine had full-time jobs at the time, they spent most of their days at home, giving them the ability to observe Daniel's every move. Janine paid attention to when he left the apartment, who he interacted with, and how he behaved when he returned. They also started checking his phone when it was left unattended or unlocked, scanning for notifications or messages. A few days after they got back, Janine reported that she had seen Daniel leaving work with a young woman. They stood outside together, smoking and talking. According to her, there wasn't anything clearly romantic, but there was an easy familiarity between them. Janine remembered the woman's appearance. When she described her, Antoinette immediately suspected it might be their neighbor, Ashley. She recalled seeing her in the complex courtyard a few times, usually with her son. That same evening, they decided to keep watch to see if Ashley showed up again. Over the next few days, Antoinette and Janine took turns keeping an eye on the apartment entrance and the area around the store. They needed to confirm that it was indeed Ashley who was interacting with Daniel. Eventually, their surveillance paid off. They spotted Daniel and Ashley talking and then going their separate ways. Once they had visual confirmation, they moved to the next phase, taking action. Antoinette suggested using Daniel's phone while he was asleep to message Ashley and lure her into meeting up, setting the stage for a direct confrontation. Janine agreed with the idea. Now they had a clear plan. It was no longer just about exposing the situation. It had become personal. They wanted revenge. The next morning, after finishing a night shift, Daniel came home and went to sleep as usual. He exchanged a few words with Antoinette before heading to the bedroom. Once he was asleep, she quietly entered the room, took his phone, and brought it out to Janine. Together, they began scrolling through his messages. It didn't take long to find what they were looking for. In his chat with Ashley, there were personal messages, words with emotional weight, mentions of past meetings, and small, telling details that confirmed the two were in regular contact. That was all the confirmation they needed to proceed to the next step. Using Daniel's phone, Antoinette began texting Ashley. She wrote that he had gotten into an argument at home and had been kicked out, and that he wanted to meet up. Ashley replied quickly, asking where he was and how she could find him. The messages read like a normal exchange between two people in a close relationship. Ashley had no idea she wasn't actually talking to Daniel. Antoinette kept the conversation calm and casual to avoid raising any suspicion. After a few messages, she suggested they meet up in the courtyard area of their apartment complex, a small green space between buildings. Ashley agreed. Once the meetup was arranged, Antoinette and Janine began preparing. They brought Janine's phone to record the encounter. They didn't have any weapons. The plan was to lure Ashley outside, confront her by surprise, and escalate the situation physically. The goal wasn't just to talk, it was to send a message. They had chosen the location strategically. The area was within sight of nearby buildings but tucked away from the main entrances. Surveillance cameras were installed in general common areas, but didn't cover this particular spot fully. It gave the impression of privacy while still being within the complex grounds. Daniel was asleep at the time, completely unaware that someone was using his phone to set in motion events that would have serious consequences. Early in the morning, Antoinette and Janine left the apartment, leaving Daniel and the sons at home. They took a position behind some bushes near a pedestrian path. The spot was shaded, a bit removed from the building entrances, but still technically on public grounds. The visibility was limited, though a passerby could potentially notice something. They waited. When Ashley texted that she was on her way, Antoinette double-checked that the phone was recording and told Janine to keep filming no matter what. Minutes later, Ashley appeared on the path. She walked calmly, unaware of what was coming. As she got closer, she looked around, expecting to see Daniel. At that moment, Antoinette and Janine stepped out from their hiding spot. Antoinette approached her and loudly announced that Ashley hadn't been texting Daniel. Before Ashley could respond, Antoinette struck her. Ashley didn't fight back. She tried to retreat, covering her face with her hands and begging Antoinette to stop, but the blows kept coming. Antoinette knocked her down onto the pavement and continued hitting her with her fists and feet. At one point, she grabbed Ashley by the hair and slammed her head against the ground. Janine didn't intervene. She stayed off to the side, filming. Occasionally, she added commentary, encouraging Antoinette and telling her to go harder. At one point, she moved in closer to get a shot of Ashley's face. Ashley continued pleading. She was crying, asking them to stop. The aggression didn't let up. Antoinette yelled accusations, made threats, and claimed she was doing this on Daniel's behalf. At one moment, she looked directly into the camera and told Janine to keep recording. Some cars passed by, but no one stepped in. One vehicle stopped briefly, then quickly drove off. The confrontation peaked when Antoinette invited Janine to join in. Janine agreed, stepped forward, and delivered a few kicks. After that, the two walked away, taking Ashley's phone with them. The recording continued until they exited the area. After the attack ended, Ashley was left lying on the pavement. She was badly hurt, but conscious. For a while, she remained on the ground, then slowly got up, unsteady on her feet. Despite the pain, she began walking toward her building. Surveillance footage from the apartment complex later captured Ashley entering. Her steps were shaky, her movements slow. She clutched her side and chest, and her face was visibly scraped. Her breathing appeared labored. Once she reached her floor, she stepped out onto the balcony, leaning against the railing to catch her breath. Around the same time, Julian was returning home from his morning run. When he entered the apartment, he immediately saw Ashley's condition. She was pale, with swollen lips and visible abrasions on her face. Her breathing was heavy, and she moved sluggishly. Her clothes were stained with dirt and traces of blood. Alarmed, Julian began asking what had happened. Ashley gave vague answers. She said she had been attacked by two women she didn't recognize. She didn't mention any names or explain why it happened. It's possible she was too scared to speak up or still in shock from the ordeal. Julian realized the situation was serious. He helped her sit down, brought her some water, but her condition quickly worsened. She was struggling to breathe and complained of sharp pain in her side and head. Any movement triggered intense discomfort. A few minutes later, he drove her to the nearest hospital. In the emergency room, doctors evaluated Ashley and made the immediate decision to transfer her to intensive care. Her condition was critical. Medical staff documented numerous bruises, broken ribs, and suspected internal injuries. She was also diagnosed with trauma to the head. Ashley was quickly moved to a better-equipped facility. Doctors began emergency procedures. Julian remained at the hospital, waiting anxiously for updates. Ashley was placed on life support and sedated. Her condition deteriorated and remained extremely serious. Several hours after the assault, local law enforcement arrived at the apartment complex. They were responding to a call about a possible altercation on the property, a report made by passers-by who had witnessed the aggressive encounter. When officers arrived at the apartment shared by Antoinette, Daniel, their sons, and Janine, Daniel wasn't home. Antoinette answered the door. She spoke with the officers calmly and appeared composed. According to her, a woman had shown up at their door uninvited, started an argument, and became physically aggressive. Antoinette claimed not to know her and said the woman initiated the confrontation. Antoinette framed the situation as a mutual altercation, stating that both parties had exchanged blows. She added that the woman had previously been harassing her partner at work and had now come to their residence to continue the harassment. She emphasized that she hadn't left the apartment prior to the incident, trying to support her version of events. At this stage, officers had no formal complaint from the injured party, no confirmed identity of the other individual involved, and no direct evidence of the assault. Antoinette's story came across as consistent, even though it didn't align with the facts. Doctors at the first hospital where Ashley was admitted had already notified local authorities due to the severity of her condition. However, at the time officers visited the apartment complex, that medical report hadn't yet been linked to the earlier call made from Antoinette's address. Details about the extent of Ashley's injuries and her identity came later. Police left the apartment without filing a formal report. They documented a verbal statement, but no search was conducted, and no phones were collected as evidence. This misjudgment allowed crucial materials to remain untouched. At this point, neither Antoinette nor Janine realized they would soon be named as official suspects. Following the initial examination at the emergency room, doctors quickly suspected serious internal trauma. Ashley was conscious, but struggling to breathe and barely able to answer questions. A CT scan revealed multiple critical injuries. She had broken ribs that had punctured her lungs, internal bleeding around her liver and abdomen, and a significant brain injury with swelling. Because the facility lacked the resources for urgent neurosurgery and abdominal procedures, doctors decided on an immediate transfer to a specialized trauma center. Ashley was placed on a ventilator and sedated into a medically induced coma. She was airlifted to a hospital located in another part of the state. A team of trauma surgeons and critical care doctors was already waiting. Upon arrival, Ashley was rushed into the operating room. Surgeons attempted to stop the internal bleeding and stabilize her vital signs, but the injuries were too extensive. Her liver was partially ruptured, and there was massive hemorrhaging in her abdominal cavity. During the operation, it became clear that her injuries were not survivable. Approximately 1 hour after being transferred, Ashley went into cardiac arrest. Medical teams performed CPR for 30 minutes, but were unable to restore a heartbeat. She was pronounced dead early that morning, just a few hours after the attack. Meanwhile, hospital staff had sent a required report to the local police department indicating that a patient had arrived showing signs of being attacked. Even as Ashley was being transferred, that information had been passed to the on-call officer. However, it hadn't yet been connected to the earlier visit officers made to the complex. Ashley's death shifted the legal scope of the case. The hospital's report reached the police department, now indicating a fatal outcome. Officers quickly matched that update to the earlier complaint about a physical altercation and discovered that the address matched. The last name of the deceased was confirmed through medical records and matched entries associated with the apartment complex. The police department leadership decided to dispatch officers back to Antoinette's apartment. By that point, the situation was no longer viewed as a simple domestic dispute. It was now being treated as a potential felony resulting in death. This marked the beginning of a formal criminal investigation. Authorities also requested Ashley's full medical documentation to confirm the extent and nature of her injuries. The initial medical report indicated that her wounds couldn't have resulted from a minor altercation or mutual confrontation. The trauma to her head, chest, and internal organs reflected a sustained, forceful beating. There were multiple strikes, and they targeted critical areas. No defensive wounds or signs of resistance were found, suggesting the victim likely did not strike back or physically defend herself. Based on these medical findings, the forensic report, and surveillance footage from the apartment complex, a criminal case was officially opened. After receiving confirmation of Ashley's passing, investigators returned to the complex and arrested both Antoinette and Janine. They were taken to the precinct and placed in separate interview rooms. Questioning began immediately. Antoinette appeared composed but withdrawn. She avoided eye contact, spoke softly, and gave vague responses. Her answers were brief, and she stuck to the same story she had shared earlier. She claimed Ashley showed up at their home uninvited, instigated an argument, and threw the first punch. Her version of events made no mention of the text messages, the prearranged meeting, or the use of Daniel's phone. Antoinette insisted the incident was spontaneous and that she acted only in self-defense. When detectives pointed out inconsistencies between her story and medical findings, she didn't react. After a few more follow-up questions, she requested a lawyer and ended the interview. Janine's interrogation took a very different turn. She entered the room confidently and began talking without pressure. She didn't appear nervous. At times, she even laughed and made sarcastic comments. Her demeanor was more casual, like she was chatting with friends, not speaking with law enforcement. Detectives adopted a reflective approach. They mirrored her tone and avoided confrontation. This strategy worked. Janine began openly recounting the events, including details that had not yet come to light. Without hesitation, she described how Daniel had confessed to seeing someone else, how she had relayed that information to Antoinette, and how the two of them had come up with the plan to message Ashley from Daniel's phone. She even explained who first suggested recording the encounter and how they hid until Ashley arrived. Her description of the confrontation was especially notable. Janine, without a trace of embarrassment, admitted she participated in the physical aggression. She explained she joined in because they invited her to be part of it, and went on to describe the moment as funny. Detectives noted everything but allowed her to continue without interruption. They kept a neutral expression and let her speak freely. During the questioning, Janine also confirmed that the video had been filmed on her phone and that she still had the footage saved. Nearly everything Antoinette had tried to conceal, Janine voluntarily disclosed. Her statements were officially documented and used to secure a warrant for a search of the apartment. The behavior of the two women in custody stood in stark contrast. Antoinette tried to remain composed, denying the facts, while Janine openly laid out the entire sequence of events, showing little regard for the gravity of what had happened. At this point, investigators had direct testimony confirming that Ashley was deliberately lured into a trap. Janine's emotional detachment and complete lack of remorse strengthened the case that the attack had not only been deliberate, but premeditated. Following the interviews, investigators obtained search warrants. Phones from all involved parties were seized, including Janine's, which contained a full video recording of the assault. The footage confirmed that Ashley did not fight back and that the blows were delivered methodically and with clear intent. The audio also captured mocking comments, threats, and statements that left no doubt the attack was planned. Daniel's phone revealed the message thread where Antoinette had posed as him to arrange the meeting. This served as direct evidence of deception used to lure Ashley into harm's way. Based on this, both Antoinette and Janine were formally charged with criminal offenses, including felony assault and robbery. Their arrests were processed as part of a broader criminal investigation. The charges were explained, and both suspects were informed of the serious legal implications. Their behavior again diverged. Antoinette remained silent, while Janine continued to act defiant. Both arrests were carried out without resistance, but under close supervision by officers. Daniel learned of what happened later. At the time of the arrests, he was at work. Officers arrived at his job to inform him of Ashley's death and the charges brought against Antoinette and Janine. Daniel was devastated. He had no idea about the revenge plan, the impersonation using his phone, or the attack itself. According to his statement, he could never have imagined the situation would spiral into such a tragedy. Daniel was brought in to give a formal statement. He confirmed that Ashley had never posed a threat to anyone, and their relationship had not been a secret. He also stated he had never given his phone to anyone and was unaware of any messages sent from it. His account matched the evidence collected, and investigators found no reason to consider him complicit in the crime. He expressed full cooperation and may be called as a witness in court, as the fatal setup was orchestrated using his digital identity, albeit without his knowledge. Eventually, both suspects were found guilty and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Although Janine was only 17 at the time, the court decided to try her as an adult due to the nature of the crime. If her sentence isn't extended for disciplinary issues while incarcerated, she will be released around age 37. The consequences were devastating. Ashley's son was left without his mother. Custody was granted to Julian, who continued raising him. Although Julian and Ashley had ended their relationship long ago, he had always been active in his son's life. Now he assumed full responsibility, working to provide stability and safety despite the overwhelming loss. Daniel and Antoinette's two sons also lost their mother. Since Daniel was not found to be involved in the crime, he retained custody and continued parenting alone. Despite the trauma of losing Ashley and the emotional weight of knowing the mother of his sons was imprisoned for decades, Daniel remained committed to his role as a father. Both families were shattered. One child lost his mother, and two others were left without hers as well. What started as a situation rooted in jealousy and betrayal ended in tragedy, incarceration, and long-term pain for those who had no part in what happened. The young lives affected will always carry the impact of a crime they had no role in, but from which they will never be fully free. Thanks for watching, everyone. Your support means a lot to me, and you can help my channel grow by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, and sharing this video. Your engagement really makes a difference. See you soon.